So finally, the portfolio website is here. So in today's video, we're going to be creating this Lensworth portfolio website, wherein you can see that we have this image alchemist and then this heading and also some text here, and then with projects and then LinkedIn link button. So on the left side, we have the text, and then on the right side, we have an amazing stylish image. Now upon clicking on the project, you get taken to the project section wherein we have these cool cards for the projects. You can click on this about and you get taken to the about section wherein it has the name of the photographer, and then also a contact page with simple stylish design and also a simple footer. So we're going to be creating this website from scratch using HTML and CSS. Now this website is also responsive, so you can see that this is also pretty neat for mobile devices as well. Now the source code for this project would be down in the description, and also the link to the deployed project would be down in the description as well, so you guys can check that out as well. And you can also use the source code of this project and use it anywhere you want. It is totally free and you can use it for commercial purpose if you want as well. Now this project is for absolute beginners, meaning that even if you do not have much of the skills with HTML and CSS, you should be good enough to code along with me along this video. Now if you need a bit of revision or a bit of brush up, then you can always check out my HTML and CSS crash course. Now for the CSS, we also will be using Flexbox. So recently I released a crash course on CSS Flexbox as well, so you guys can definitely check that out. And in the video or in the project, you'd see that I'll be using rem units instead of m and pixels, so you can definitely check out my another video wherein I specify why to use rem units instead of pixels and m's. Now I don't want to stretch out this video and make it any longer, since it is almost an hour long. Now I'm hoping that if you guys are new to the channel and if you haven't subscribed my channel yet, please make sure to subscribe, because it is a huge motivation for me, since most of you guys just watch my videos and do not actually subscribe. And if you subscribe, make sure you turn the notification bell so that you remain updated whenever I upload interesting videos like these. So here I am in my home screen. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is create this new folder, and let's name it Eva Lensworth. And then I'm going to open my VS Code, and then we'll just drop this folder in. Now inside here we're going to create some folders. The first would be for the CSS. Let's name it CSS. And then we create another one for the images. Let's call it images. And then the index.html file, which is going to be our main file. Now inside of a CSS, we need the CSS file, so let's call it style.css, and we're almost done. Now for the images, I need to copy the images and paste it in the folder. So what I'm going to do is I'll just copy the images from the main folder, and then I'll just open this Eva Lensworth folder here, and then inside of the images I'm going to just paste in the images that I just copied. Now you can see it has all the images. Once you open the VS Code, we can see the images right here as well, since this is the same exact folder. Now inside of our index.html file, in our index.html file, we're gonna hit exclamation and create the basic border template, and then we'll link our style.css file, which is inside of the CSS folder. And then we're gonna name the title as Eva Lensworth. Now I'm just gonna open this using live server in my default browser, that is, I think, Edge. Now I'm gonna copy this URL and close my Edge because I like using Chrome. So I'll just paste the URL and open this in Chrome. Now let's also open the finished project. So since I've deployed in Netlify, I'm gonna just type in the URL and we'll open the page. So this is the finished project, So now if you see in the finished project, we have the icons in the footer. So to use these icons, we need to import Font Awesome. So I'm gonna be using the CDN.js, and then we'll grab onto the Font Awesome CDN link. So I'm gonna type in CDN.js, and then from here, I'm gonna just copy this link and we'll paste it right above my style.css file. Now once we're done with that, we also need to import the fonts that are used in the website. Now I usually like using Poppins, but we need another secondary font. So in this case, I'm using Playfair Display. So this is Playfair Display and this is Poppins. So I'm gonna be importing both of this from Google Fonts. So let's open Google Font. And let's click on this, and here we go. Now I have already copied the different font weights, so all I need to do is copy this import here, and let's just copy this, and then I just need to paste it in my style.css. So we are almost done with the basic setup, and we can get started with the meat of the project. Now if you look closely to the finished project, you would see that it has 4 sections. So you have the hero section, the about, then the project section, and then the contact section, and then you have the small footer. Now for the home section, you see that it is divided in 2 sections, one for the content, the text, and then one for the image. And then the same is being used for the about. The only difference is the image is on the left and then the text on the right. If you see that this discover the world through lens, and also these 2 headings are almost same, so we're going to use same class. And then also for this sub heading or the text, these 2 are also same. And then for the buttons, you'd see that we have 3 different types of buttons. First those 2, and then this one. So we basically have 3 types of buttons. And then we have this small form. All right, so this is basically the basic structure, and then these headings with this bar. All right, and then these same headings are also being used in the cards as well. All right, so now what we're going to do is in my body, I'm going to create a main div. So I'm going to try to keep it as much as HTML semantic, and then I'm going to create the header for the navigation, and then I'm going to create a container. Now the reason for adding container, because I want to add a bit of gapping between the main content of the body, and then I'm going to add the footer for the footer. Now inside of the header, we need to add the nav for the navigation, and then inside of this nav, we're going to add 4 anchor tags for the 4 nav items. Now the first one's going to be for the hero section. So I'm going to just add the logo or the brand name, that is Lensworth, inside of a strong tag, since I want the nav, the logo to be kind of bold. And then I'm going to create another anchor tag for the about, and then I'm going to copy and paste it several more times for the projects and also for the contact. Now since we're done with the navigations, let's see how it looks. So we have Lensworth, and then about, project, and contact. Now inside the container, let's create 4 sections. For one for the hero, then we have about, project, and the contact. Now the containers are also done. So now let's start with the hero section, where we have the hero text section and then the image section. So inside of hero, we can create 2 divs with the class of one with the class of hero text, and then one with the class of hero image for the image. Now inside of the hero text, first, if you look closely here, we have this image alchemist tag, and then followed by this h2, and then this paragraph, and then the buttons. So we're going to create an h4 for the tag, and we're going to write here image alchemist. So let's copy this, and then let's paste it here, and then let's write h2, and then let's copy this heading and we'll paste that as well. And now for the paragraph, We're done. Now for these two buttons, we're going to be now, since on clicking they redirect us to the project, so we obviously need to use anchor tags instead of the normal button. So we're going to use anchor tag for those, and we're going to add the class of btn-1. Now this btn would be the base class, and then btn 1, 2, and 3 would be for the 3 specific classes. So I'm going to copy and paste it another time. So one would be btn1, and then the second would be btn2. Now the second one would be LinkedIn, so you can also add the URL of your LinkedIn account if you want. Now for the hero image, I'm going to add the image tag, and then I'm going to just add the images and then the source of my hero image. And with that, this is how it looks. Now this image has this background color which will blend in with the background when we add the CSS. Now with that, we're basically done with our hero section. Now for the about section, if you look closely to the finished project, it is kind of similar to the hero section. Now for this, we need to have the heading. Now this heading is kind of common to both, not both exactly, so it is common to all three of the sections, about, projects, and contact. So first we're gonna need a common class, so let's call it heading. Now since this same heading is being used for the cards, and this needs to have a bar underneath, so we also will add another class as bar next to the heading, and we're going to add about there, and then we're going to create an about container which would hold the about text for the text, and then the about image. Now inside of the about text, we would have this h2, so just like this. So I'm just going to copy this and then paste it inside of an h2, and then the about detail, we're going to use a paragraph tag, and I'm just going to copy this and then we'll paste it inside of the p tag. And then this resume button that we have, we're going to again use an anchor tag, since this might be redirected to somewhere else, so you can use an anchor tag for that. It is always better. So I'm going to just use an anchor tag, and then we'll add, instead of projects, I'm going to add here resume. Now for the image, I think the image would be above this about text, so I'm going to just copy and paste it above about text, and then inside of this I'm going to use the image tag, and then we'll add the source of our image. And with that, our HTML for the about page is also complete. Now we're going to get started with our project section, which has these cards and also this heading, the same heading with the bar. So inside our project, we're going to first write the heading bar, the common heading that we're using for all the sections. And here I'm going to just write projects. And then we're going to have 3 cards for the 3 different project showcasing in the website. So I'm going to create a card and then write asterisk 3, and it's going to create 3 card divs. Now inside of the card, we have one section for the card text, so we're going to use a class card text, and then one for the image, so we're going to write card image. Now inside of the card text, we have the same heading that is we are using, so we're going to use the heading without the bar this time, so we're just going to write heading. So we're going to write heading, and then I'm going to just copy the text from here, Nature's Symphony, and we'll just paste it in here. And then for the detail of the card, I'm going to use a paragraph tag, and then we'll paste the detail. Now right after that, we're going to use another anchor tag for the view project. Now this time this is going to be btn3, because this is the 3rd type of the btn. And then I'm going to write here as view project. Now for the card image, I'm going to write the image tag, and then we'll add images, and then we'll go to the project one, and then we'll add that specific project image. Now with that, it looks something like this. Now I'll just quickly go and copy this and then add the specific details for the project 2 and also for project 3. Now with that, we have successfully completed our project HTML section as well. Now all that's left is to work on the contact and then the footer. Now for the contact section, apart from the same heading that we are using, we have 2 inputs and then 1 text area. So first, let's add the heading with the bar class as well. So I'm going to just write a div with the heading and then the bar, and then we're going to write contact. And then for the form, we're going to use the form tag, and then since we're not dealing with the backend, we do not actually need this action attribute. I'm going to remove that, and then for each form control class, I like to create F control class. Now if you have been following me for a while, you know that for the form controls, I generally use this class name, F control. And then we're going to have a label for the label, and then for the input, for the first one, we're going to have an input text. And then I'm just going to copy this, and then we'll paste it 2 more times. Now for the second one, we're going to have email, and then the text, the input type as well would be email. And then for the third, it would be, the label would be message, and then the input would be text area instead of the normal input that we have. And then we'd also need a button to basically submit the form. So we're going to write a button instead of an anchor tag this time, and we're going to add type to submit, and then we'll add the class of btn1 since it is going to be of type 1. And then I don't think I've written anything inside of button. Yeah, so I need to add the inner text. Now let's add here submit. Yeah, so let's just add a send instead of submit. Yeah, this looks better. And with that, we have also completed the HTML for the contact form. Now all we need to do is create the markup for our footer. So if you see here, the footer has 2 sections, one for the social media, and then the second one for the name of the photographer, and with the year, which is 2023. Now I'm just going to write here a div with the class of social media, and then within which we're going to create 3 anchor tags. Each anchor tag would have the URL. If you want, you can add the URL for the link, and then I'm gonna add the icon for Instagram, LinkedIn, and one for the email. So we have our icons. Now right after that, I'm gonna use the paragraph tag, and then we'll add the copyright symbol with ampersand COPY, and then followed by a semicolon, and then adding the name of the photographer, that is Eva Lensworth, and then 2023. Now with that, we're done with our HTML. Now we're going to get started with our CSS. So we're going to open our CSS file, and the first thing that we're going to do is remove some default styling that CSS has. So the first thing that we're going to do is remove any extra margin or padding if any element has. And then we're going to set box sizing to border box, meaning that we do not want to increase the width and height of any element if we add padding or let's say margin and stuff. And then since we're going to be using rem units inside of m units, we're going to be setting the base or the root font size as 62.5%. Now if you guys have no clue about rem, m, and pixel units, I have an individual video why rem are better than pixels and m's, so I'm going to be adding the link to that, so make sure you guys check that video out. Now here I'm going to set the font size to 62.5%, meaning that now 1 rem would be equal to 10 pixels. Now you can see that now the font sizes are pretty small. And then for the nav bars, you'd see when I click, nothing actually happens. So when we click, we want each individual nav item to take us to that specific section. So here in the href, I'm going to add the ID of all the different sections. So for the lens toward, I'm going to add the hero section, hero ID, and then for the about, we're going to about, and then for the project, we're going to add project, and then for the contact, we're going to add contact. Now since we haven't declared these IDs, we're going to add these IDs to the different sections that we created. So I'm just gonna write the ID here and then add that specific ID. Now let's click on any of these and let's try to go to that specific section, but I don't think this will work. Yeah, so first let's add the CSS property of scroll behavior to smooth, which basically adds the smooth transitioning from one ID to another. And now let's see. I think I might have written the ID something different probably. Yeah, so here what I did is I have added this pound symbol right before the ID name, so which I should remove. Let me remove it, and then let's try again. Now when I click, you can see that it smoothly takes us to that specific section. Now if we don't have this smooth scrolling or the scroll behavior to smooth, you'd see that the sections, whenever we want to go to a specific section, it just takes us to that section in a snap, which we don't like. So we need that smooth transition, so we can write scroll behavior to smooth. All right, now there's another cool property, that is scroll padding top, which basically adds a bit of padding whenever you want to scroll to that specific section. Now let's add 5 rem to that. Now let's go to the about, you'd see that we have a bit of gapping from the top of the screen. So this is what this does. Now let's add this anchor tag, and then by default anchor tag have the text decoration. Let's remove that, and also the anchor tag have their own specific color. So by default they do not inherit the color of their parent, so we want it to inherit. So I'm going to write color inherit, and we're almost done with the basic styling. Now for the body, let's give it a width of 100%, or first let's add the font size back to normal, that is 16 pixels, which is 1.6 rem. And then let's add the width to 100%, and then we're going to add a min height of 100 viewport height, followed by the background color, which is the same color that we have as the background for the images, so that it blends in well with the image as well. And then we're gonna have font family. So the basic font family for the body would be Poppins. Only for a few specific headings we're gonna have that as Playfair display. So the base font would be Poppins, and then the fallback value would obviously be sans serif. And then the color won't be black, but a specific shade of black, which is this. Now let's target the main tag, and then let's give it a width of 100%, so that it takes in the entire width of then the body. And then as you can see that the main is taking the entire width and height. Now we have this container class, which is basically providing the padding from the left and right. All right, so the main would have the width of 100%, and we cannot add the padding to the main tag, because if we add, then this the header that we see would also have that padding. So we would have a specific container class which would have the padding. So for the main, it would be width 100% with no padding. And then now we're going to target the header which would have the width of 100%, and then this would have padding now. So this would have a position of fixed, since we want it to be at the top. Anytime we scroll, we still want to see this at the top. And then the background color would be that, and then we would add a bit of padding, 2 rem top and bottom, and 5 rem for left and right. And then the z index needs to be 1000, since this needs to be at the topmost level. And then for the box shadow, we're going to add a y value of 0.5, and then would add this blur, and then would have this as the color with 0.5 05 as the shade. Now with that, you can see that our nav bar is almost ready. Now the only thing that we need to do is align our nav items. Now the nav tag inside of the nav bar has all the nav elements, so we're going to write width 100% and then add the property of display flex, and then add a gap of 3 rem since we want gapping between each of these. Now you'd see that this about, project, and contact are on the right side. So to get them to the right side, all we need to do is go to the about and add the style attribute, and then right margin left to auto, and then this would push everything on the right. Now with that, the nav bar is almost complete. Now you see that the nav bar also has this hover state, and for the hover state we're going to target the anchor tag inside of the nav, and then would have the hover property, and then would give it a color, the yellow color that we're using for the website theme. So we're going to add that. And so upon hover we see this, and you can click and then you can go to that specific section as well. So before we get started with our hero section, we have this container which is basically wrapping all the different sections. And now if you look closely to the design, you would see that no matter what you do, even if you zoom out, they do not touch the left and right edges of the screen. So even if I zoom out or zoom in, they'll never touch the left and right border. Now the reason for that is because we have a container div which is at the center, and then the width of the container is never 100%. So it's kind of creates a like a center width or a center div which is holding everything in the center. So for that, you're gonna go to your CSS and then target the container div and then add width with a calc function, which is a CSS inbuilt function, and then we want to subtract 100% by 10 rem. So meaning that no matter what is the width of the screen, it will always subtract 10 rem from the entire size, and then would have a margin of auto left and right, so that we have the div at the center. And with the border, you can clearly see that it is at the center. Now we're going to have everything inside of this container. So you can see that we have the gapping on the left and on the right side. Now we're going to get started with our hero section, and we're going to give it width of 100% and also height of 100 viewport height, since we kind of want to have this look more like landing page. And then would have display flex with justify content and align items as center, since we want both the container, the hero text, and the hero image to be at the center. Now let's remove the border and let's see how it looks. Now we're going to target the H2, which has the image alchemist. So we're going to target that, which is inside of hero text with H2, and we're going to give it the color, the yellow color that we are using. Now if you look closely, you'd see that this image alchemist do not actually have much of a contrast. So to have the contrast, we're going to use text shadow, and we're going to give this a bit of black shade of text shadow so that it has a bit more contrast. Now this is looking much better. Now when that is done, we want to target this H2. Now instead of directly targeting this with the hero, we want to just make it a global styling. So we want to target the H2, and then we want to add the necessary styling, since we can also use this in the about section as well. So we're going to target the H2 and give it a font family. Now this time this would have the font family of Playfair display, so we're going to add that with the fallback of sans serif. And then this would have margin bottom of 1.5 rem along with the font size of 5 rem. Now you'd see that this is not looking exactly like how our project looks, since this through my lens needs to be in a new line. So to do that, we can set a max width in characters. So we want to target the H2 this time inside of the hero text. Now this time I want to specify hero text, since we only want this max width to be applied to the H2 inside of the hero text with a character of 15 characters of max width. Now this would bring through my lens in a new line. Now let's target the paragraph tag that we have in the hero text. So the paragraph tag would have a bit of opacity of 0.7, since we don't want it to be the 100% black color that we're using. And then also we want to add a bit of line height between the lines that we're having. And then margin bottom, and also a max width of 60 characters. Now let's style our hero image and let's position this absolute. Now when we position absolute, we also would add overflow to hidden, since we don't want it to overflow. Now if you see the project, you would see that the image, the text is nowhere seen. Now the reason for that is because the text is hiding underneath that. So I'm going to add a z-index of -1, which would bring the text at the top, and then would place the image on the right corner with top and then this right value, and then would add overflow to hidden, since we also will be scaling this image by directly using the transform property on the image tag. Now for this image, first we would have the width and height to 100%, and then also we would maintain the aspect ratio by giving the object fit to cover, and then we would add the transform scale to 1.2. Now we want the text, the hero text, to be on the left side, so we can add the width of the hero text to 100%, which would bring the text on the left side. Now with that, the basic structure of our hero section is done. Now all we have to do is style the buttons. Now since these buttons are utility classes, I'm going to just add a comment here, and then we'll write here buttons, so that it is easier for you guys to understand where is what. First I'm going to target the base button class, that is btn, and would have some basic styling that I want this btn to have. Now by default, the buttons do not have the font family inherited, so I want to add font family inherit, and then would remove the outline and border, and then would have a padding, followed by display inline block, and then also the cursor to be pointer. Now this is the base model for our buttons, and then now we can just add btn 1, 2 and 3. Now for this we would only need btn 1 and btn 2. So for the btn 1, we're going to set the background, and then also a border of 0.2 rem, which is 2 pixels, solid with the yellow color. Now you might wonder, why do we need this border? Because the border is not distinguished, since it is same as the background. The reason for adding that is because the btn2 has a border, and now if you don't have a border onto btn1, the height won't match. So this is the reason why we're having the border for the normal btn1 as well. And then we would also add a border radius, and then I'm gonna just write btn2, and then we'll have here the background and then the border, and this would also have a border radius. Now the last thing that is left to do is to add a bit of gapping between projects and then this LinkedIn button. Now to add that, I'm gonna go to the hero text and would target the btn class, and then would have the margin right as 1 rem. Now if you see the about projects, and then this contact, all three of them are kind of similar. So what we could do is we could have a common style for all three of those. So I'm gonna add about, project, and also contact. Now these would have a width of 100%, followed by a display flex with a flex direction as column, since first they have the heading and then the next content gets wrapped up in a new line. So this is kind of like a column structure. So we're gonna have display flex as column. And now since all of these are aligned at the center, we would also have justify content and align items to center as well. And then we would also have a padding top of 4 rem followed by a margin bottom of 3 rem. Now we're going to create the utility class for the heading. Now this heading would also contain that bar utility class, which has the yellow line underneath the heading. So first we're going to target the heading and would give it a font size of 3.5 rem followed by the Playfair font family, and then also a font weight of 600. Now wherever this heading is used, you'd see that this styling has been applied. Now we gotta add that bar just underneath the heading. So for that, we're gonna add the bar class, and then we're gonna have position relative to it, since we're gonna create the pseudo element, and then we're gonna place that absolutely to this heading. And then wherever this bar is used, we want to make sure that it has sufficient spacing underneath itself. So we're going to add a margin bottom of 5 rem, and then we're going to create the pseudo element after, and then would specify the content as blank, because without that we won't be able to create any pseudo element. And then we're going to have width to 90%, and then height to this, and then with the border radius, and then also the background color of yellow. Now this needs to be positioned absolutely, so we want to add position absolute followed by a bottom value and then also a left value. Now we want to place it at the center in the x-axis, so we're going to transform and translate x to -50%. There we go. Next, we're going to style the about text and would give it width of 100%. Now, if you see the finished project, you would see that in the hero section, you would see for smaller screens, this hero image is set to display none, since we do not want this image to be shown for smaller devices. But then this image in the about is stacking on top of each other. So what we want to do is for the about section, we want the text and also the image to stack one upon the other. Now we want to target the about text paragraph tag, and then we would use the same exact styling that we have used for the hero text paragraph, and we're going to copy this and I'm going to just paste it in here. Now the only thing that we don't need is the max width of 60 characters. Now we get to target the about container, and then would give it a width of 100% followed by display flex with justify and align items to center. Now whenever we would want this about container to have its children stack on top of each other, all we need to do is inside of the media query we need to write display or the flex direction as column, and then we would have the children stack on top of each other. Next up, we have the project section. Now this has these cards. Now these cards have content on left and then the image on the right, and then some have the image on left and then the content on the right. Now we could obviously get this effect using the nth child property, but what I want to do is I want to create or add another specific class for this reverse behavior. So let's say you want to have more dynamic functionality to the cards, and let's say you want to have two of the cards having a different style and then the third one have different, instead of the nth child odd even styling. So in that case you cannot actually use this way, this end child way. So it would be kind of better to use or have a different class having this. So for that, what I did is I have created another class as a reverse, which would basically have the row flex direction as a row reverse. Now we're going to create the card utility classes. So I'm going to add a comment here and then would write card. And so the card, first it would have this card with width and also a height. And then we would also add properties like overflow hidden with flex, and then align everything center. And also, as you could see, that the card have a bit of border or rounded edges, so we would also have that as well. Now the cards would also have a background of white, and you can see that it is pretty much looking like what we have. The only thing is we need to align its children. Now since the cards are stacking or like getting attached to one another, we need to create some kind of gapping between them. So I've written margin top and bottom as 4 rem and left and right is 0. And then I'd also add box shadow. And then would target the heading of the card text, and then would give it a margin bottom of 1 rem. Now we would also need to add some styling to the card text, like line height and also a bit of padding. And then we would also need to align the BTN as well. Now before we design the button 3, first let's do the card text and let's give it width of 100%, and let's give it line height and also padding on the left and right. With that, it is looking much better. Now the only problem is we need to style the card image. So let's target the card image, and then let's give it width and height 100%. And then the image inside of the card image, let's give it width and height also of 100%. And then let's keep the aspect ratio same by giving object fit to cover. And then with that, we can see our card looking beautiful. Now the only thing left to do is to create BTN3. The BTN3 would be same as BTN2, but the only difference would be the border radius would be more than what BTN2 has. So we can just copy this and then just paste it in here and then just change the value of a border radius. Now this view project button needs to have a bit of margin top, so we're going to target that inside of the card and we're going to give that specific margin. Now with that, the card and our project section is complete. Now before we get started with our contact, you can see that this contact has 2 specific inputs and 1 text area. So I can just write here contact, and then the form just inside of the contact, we can give it a display property of flex. Right, and then we can give flex direction as column, since all the form control would be, or the F control would be stacking on top of each other. Now if you look closely here, this card, I think I forgot to add that CSS styling. So as I've said, the reverse class that we're going to add to our card, so that reverse would have the flex direction as row reverse. And also the box shadow direction would also change from left to right and bottom. All right, so this box shadow from left would now change to right and bottom. So I'm just going to copy this and then we just paste it in here, and then instead of minus here, I'm just going to remove minus and then done. All right, now let's get back to the contact form. Now, since we want the items inside of the form to be at the center, we want to have justify content and align items as center. Now we need to target our F control class and we'll give it display flex with flex direction column, since we want the name, the label and then the input to be stacking on top of each other. And then we'll add a margin, top and bottom of 1 rem, and left and right is 0, and then would give a gap of 1 rem. Now we want to target the input and also the text area inside of the F control, and want to give them a padding, a specific width of 60 rem, and also a max width. So let's get started with the padding. Let's give it top and bottom of 1 rem and left and right is 1.8, and then give them a width of 60 rem. All right, now the problem here is when you give 60 rem on smaller screens, you would see that this is overflowing. So for that, we can have a max width value, which would be calculated using the calc function with 100 viewport width minus 3 rem. All right, now on smaller screens, this would be something like that. And then also we want to have a border of slightly white color, and then would have a border radius of 0.5 rem and outline as none. Now the text area that we just created needs to have a height of 20 rem, and then we also don't want the user to be able to resize it, so we would also remove the resize as well. Now the last thing that is left in our form is to align the submit button on the left side. So we're going to target the button inside of the form, and then we're going to set margin right as auto, and this would align the button on the left side. And with that, we're also done with our contact form. Now for the footer, we're going to target the footer tag, and then we'll give it width of 100%, and then we'll have display flex, and then the flex direction would be column, since we have the social media, and then also we have one for the name of the photographer and then the copyright stuff. And then since we want everything at the center, we're going to have align items and justify content as center, and then we would give it a padding top and bottom of 8 rem and then left and right as 0. Now if you see the original one, you don't find much padding, but in this one I kind of want to have more padding on the top and bottom, so I've given the padding as 8 rem. Now I'm going to target the social media, and then would give it display flex, and then would give it gap of 3 rem, since I want the icons to have a gap between each of them. So I'm going to give it them the gap of 3 rem with margin bottom of 1.5 rem with font size and also the black color. Now, even though you might think that the website is complete, but there is one big thing that is left and is yet to be done, and that is having enough media query to make it responsive. Now, for the smaller and then for the mobile devices, you would find that this website is not responsive at all. And so we need to add enough and sufficient media queries and then all specific properties so that it looks good on mobile devices as well. So I'm gonna come down, and here I'm gonna have the media screen, of 768 pixels, meaning that the max width of for the devices having 768 pixels. So for those devices, I'm going to target the HTML and change the value of rem. Now previously it was 62.5%, and I'm going to change the font size to 58%. Now with this, the entire website, you'd see that the font sizes have changed, since for small device I don't want everything to look that big. Then I'm going to target the container and change the width. So here in the calc function, I'm going to change that 100% minus 10 rem to 100% minus 3 rem. And then I'm going to target the hero text, the paragraph, and then give it line height of 2 and then word spacing of 1 rem. And then I'm going to target the hero image, and then we'll remove it for the small screens. Now if you see, the hero image is gone. And then wait, this nav bar, let me just refresh. Okay, so we have the nav bar. Okay, now we're going to target the about container, and then since we want the items to stack on top of each other, so I'm going to write flex direction as column, which would make everything stack on top of it. You see the image, and then you have everything else, right? Now this image is kind of overflowing, sort of. We'll solve it in a second. First, let's add the card. So you would see that the finished product has the card with a different design. So initially the design was horizontal, but then on smaller screens, the image, you have the image on top, and then you have the text underneath that. So kind of in a column direction. So here I'm gonna write height as auto instead of the 40 rem that we had, and then width 100%, and then we're gonna give flex direction as column reverse, since the image is written after the text, so we want the image to be at the top and then the text. So I'm gonna write column reverse, and then now the box shadow would be all around in the 4 direction instead of just 2. So with that, we have the box shadow done, and then the card is also done. Now we're going to target the card image, which is pretty big in this case. So we want to change or have a specific height for the card image. Now let's add 25 rem for the card image, and let's have the overflow as hidden. And then for the card text, let's add a padding of 2 rem. Now with that, our card looks pretty neat and is good to go. Now for screens with max width of 480 pixels, we want to have some specific styling for that as well. So we're going to target the header, and we want to reduce the padding. Now we want the padding to be 2 rem all over, from top, bottom, left and right. So I'm going to change that as well. Now with that, our nav bar looks perfectly fine for the smaller devices. Now finally, for the image in the about, I found out that I haven't added the width for the about image. So I'm going to target the about image and give width of 100%, followed by targeting the image inside of the about and giving it a width and also a height, and then the object fit to cover. Now with that, this looks fine, and we have our website ready to go. Now if you like the content of the channel, and if you're new to the channel, and if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe our channel for more such content. Now watching the videos and not following along is not how you would learn. So I highly recommend that while watching the video, make sure you have your VS Code open and you code along with me so that you learn it a better way. And yeah, the source code of the project is always will be in the description, so make sure to check that out and use it. Thank you. Till then, bye bye.